how do we create a million innovators and entrepreneurs, primarily from underserved communities. This has been my research and work for the last 10 years at MIT on my thesis, and then as a professor in Asia School of Business, and now as Ncube Lab, which stands for Entrepreneurship Incubation Lab. We are trying to see how do we incubate entrepreneurs in places. Now, why is this important? When you look at the 17 SDGs that are stated, every single SDG requires innovation and entrepreneurship to identify problems, solve problems, and scale them so that you can actually make an impact. So I believe the primary SDG, the SDG 0, is to create such innovators and entrepreneurs around the world. Because problems are not central. Any problem that you take and you go into a village, into a community, into a country, into a region, they have a very different aspect of the problem that they need to solve. So you cannot have a one single solution that can address everything. So we need to help youth and children to become the future innovators and entrepreneurs to address these things. So now, before I go there, since it's about education, I am quite worried about this trend that I talk about, called the great dropout that is happening. During COVID, we had 2 year plus of kids kind of lost learning because they did not have devices, connectivity, or even teachers did not know how to teach online. Kids got pushed up to the next grade. They had now they are trying to learn higher concepts without having the basics. There is disengagement and in class. And so this is a news item from New Hampshire, which said number of students who are failing in one or more subjects, this had gone up to about 12 times, 12.5 times. Or New York Times talking about this is the lowest in the learning in the last 30 years or so. And the larger worry is about chronic absenteeism in schools. Some of the cities are seeing in the 40% level of students who are disengaged, who don't feel like coming to school. Now, how do you deal with this? When you look at the learning profile through the year, of course, we normally lose out on learning during summer. By May, the whole country was on average behind by 5 months. But when you look at the poorer communities, where they were actually behind the national average by almost a year by 2021. So, question is, how do you deal with this issue? Because all these issues that we are talking about, the environment, education, are all connected, because at the end of the day, we need to have educated youth to address and solve problems. So this is so tightly connected. We cannot go back and start teaching all these kids last 2 years of curriculum that they missed. They already have enough to learn each year. The learning is cumulative. If you haven't understood algebra 1, it is difficult to learn algebra 2. So you have this disengagement because of the lack of fundamentals. And the most important thing is, these are the kids who are coming into our workforce in the next few years. And if this is going to happen, this is going to continue, we are going to run into a larger, almost a national security level issue of education, learning, and which impacts everything else in the world. So my research shows that the primary factors that we should train children on and the youth in schools and colleges are creativity, critical thinking, problem-solving skills, and self-learning skills. If we could train them on these things, they can learn anything on their own. They can do a lot of things. They can solve problems. we are memorizing a lot of things in school. Which is causing this disengagement. Uh, can we change the way that we learn so that we could engage them? We should be focusing primarily on competency rather than curriculum that we cover in the class. And the most interesting thing is, can we make them into future innovators and entrepreneurs? And my answer is yes, because that is what I've been studying for the last 10 years. So the question is, are entrepreneurs born or made? If you really look at, this is my research for a long time, if you look at, every one of us has a dormant entrepreneur in us, and we may not recognize it. Some of us at some point say, okay, I think I have an idea. I think I can do this. They aspire to become an entrepreneur. Some of us become the first time entrepreneurs. Some of us become repeat entrepreneurs, experienced ones. So when I talk about an entrepreneur, they don't really have to start a company. It's in the original French word, which says someone who can take responsibility and execute on projects. And they could become startup. They can do startups. They could become wonderful project managers within school, within a company, or do several other things. But in this aspect, the current programs, entrepreneurship programs that we see around the world, take on people who have put their hand up and said, I think I have an idea, I want to do something, and train them to start their first startup. And the really interesting part is, this is only about 3% of the population. We're spending all our effort in transforming this 3% into 1%. Even that is making a huge difference in a country where they're creating jobs and wealth and such. Now, imagine if we can transform the 97% into that. And that is what we are missing out right now. And that has been my point, my focus of study, to see how do we transform the other 97% of the students, youth and children who believe I can't do these kind of things, and then they go through the school systems, looking for a job, rather than how do I create something on my own. I believe that 97% can be transformed. Now, I will cover that. Normally in this crowd, you'll always have one or two who kind of come out of the crowd. My point is, how do we go transform the rest? Now, when my focus primarily is to see how do we build those qualities in children and youth to build their skill sets, mindset, confidence, and aspiration, to bring them to a point where they believe at some point in future, I think I have the ability to do something as an entrepreneur. Now, the framework to create this training was done over quite a long, several years of research. And the process primarily consists of four levels. One is what I call a zero. Zero is some 97% of the students, as I said, who kind of go through the curriculum, just clear the exams and just look for a job and settle in, and never have recognized their own potential yet. And quite a lot of this damage is done by the school system itself and by the culture that we are in. We never recognize our own abilities till it is too late. So I will come to that later. The first stage to start this transformation journey is to make them into makers. Makers are the creative ones. They can think outside the box, to create things, curious to learn new things, because there are so many things to learn, obviously. And the most important thing is, how do you build their confidence in themselves to learn, to do, to lead, as well as build their self-learning skills. So I started this with running these kind of simple programs in parts of the world, where I would bring children together. And I think maybe the sound is too loud and I don't know how to change it. So we bring kids together, teach them design, technology, CAD, coding, put together electronics, and they have to make a working prototype of a product in 1 day, in 2 days. So this kid and his team made a baby cradle. When you put the baby, it automatically senses and start to rock the cradle. It doesn't solve any world problems, but it actually is a way to learn by connecting multidisciplinary systems and learning to design with these kind of things and build their ability to realize that, I think I can learn these things. So these are 13, 15-year-old children uh, in Malaysia who took a strip of LEDs and programmed it so that it starts to give out messages as you wave it. And you can see the pride in her face, that she really did it. She's 15 years old. Or these sixth graders in Saigon who could create a robot that kicks a ball and goalpost that scores goals. Interestingly, every single thing that you see there was designed and made in the 2 days. They CAD'd the boot and the ball and created all the things that you see, programmed the servo motors and all kinds of things. And now when you look back and say, what is so different about these kids? How come they can do all these things? And you realize there is nothing different about them. It is just that most of the kids have never been exposed to these kind of things that they can learn. And once you learn, you start to... So learning accelerates learning. The moment you know a few things, now you can actually learn a whole lot more because you know the basics of a few things. So building them into... training them in multidisciplinary subjects start to, now they can go into, technology or arts and all kinds of things like that. So the next stage of development is in how do you turn them into innovators? Innovators need to go find problem, use critical thinking, creative, unusual or disruptive solutions, and see how you can solve these problems and understand the value of what you're creating. And then comes the entrepreneur. If you know how to find a problem, create a solution, and develop it, now you can actually see how you can commercialize it and monetize it. So these things are built one level over the other, and they're all systems thinkers. A maker thinks within the product system, what goes inside a product. It could be mechanical, electrical, all these kind of techie stuff. Innovator thinks within a problem system. What's the problem? Who causes it? Who suffers? What's the value and pain of the problem? And how do we create solutions for them? And the entrepreneur thinks within, how do we transform the problem into an opportunity? And who's your customer? Who are we serving? How do we reach them? How do you capture the value of what we have created in a profit and team and brand and everything? Now, entrepreneurship programs today start here. I believe if you start here, you can reach school kids who are going to grow up into future problem solvers and change makers. So, makers are the creative ones who can hack things. Innovators are the problem solvers. Entrepreneurs are the value capturers. And if you can create enough of them, you can create an ecosystem in a community that starts to train others and slowly start to build this network effect or the ripple effect. I will touch on the ecosystem later. So when I started my research, it was interesting. I started with college students. And when I started working with them, I realized that, oh my God, the school system has almost done such a damage that their fears have solidified. Fears have calcified. They believe they cannot learn. And this primarily happens in the mid-teens, where children are exploratory learners, and over time, school systems start to say, okay, you don't need to learn everything. You only need to learn these 3 things to pass an exam and get a grade and get a degree. And we start to focus on what is being spoon-fed, and we lose our exploratory learning abilities. And the culture also pushes to get the top rank and top grade, and pushing us in the same groove where we lose our innate ability to learn anything. And this actually it's harder on girls. This from what I found is that the society actually puts a different pressure on girls. They kind of telegraph to them that, boys can do this, you may not be able to do this. Or I'll excuse you if you say that my math is hard. It's, oh, that is okay with it, baby. I can understand. That is not right at all, because there's zero difference between the abilities, but we kind of program them to think differently, and if anyone says, I cannot understand, I am bad at math, I would say you had a teacher sometime back in your life who put the fear of math in you, and now you cannot actually get out of that at this point. So this gets me really excited and kind of angry that we actually do this to half of our kids, to say that you can't do these kind of things. And so what I found is that to build the confidence, you need to kind of reach them before these fears have settled in. So I created this program called Zero to Maker, where we can go teach school kids. So there were a lot of work that done already, some 100 or so workshops. And this was an interesting part of the research where I created a maker lab, in a box. This is a 3D printer. You have all the electronics and all kinds of things, and created multiple such maker labs in boxes and ran experiments with rural government schools, 10 schools in Malaysia on the border with Thailand, and 7 schools in India and farming villages in the south. We brought 6 students and 2 teachers. We gave them the lab work, taught them how to use that design, and taught them how to mentor. We created mentors that can continue to teach these students in school. And we asked them to come back after a few months and show what you have created. But the workshop in Malaysia started with a simple task. They said, these are 13 and 14-year-old children. Most of them have not touched a computer. I'm sorry, they have not done any of these things before. And they were supposed to assemble their own 3D printers, because I wanted to make sure that they can repair it and fix it. And then learn CAD, design something simple like a name tag or luggage tag or something, and print before lunch on day 1. So I found that children could do it because they never thought that they could not. But adults have problems believing they can, and that is an adult's problem. And interestingly, the reason work in India was harder because these kids had not touched a computer. That's a group I was talking about. We started the class with this is the mouse, and this is where you type Google. Oops, sorry. This is where you type Google, and what I found is that these kids had zero problem learning this. The first application that they learned on a computer ever was 3D CAD. And the second one was how to put together electronics and code them and such. And none of them spoke English, so we had to hire translators who can help us. And then, since I tested these things in poorer schools, the question was, is there a difference between these schools? So I tested this in one of the richest schools here. This is in New Hampshire. I think it is, was a feeder school to Harvard, and costs some $80,000 a year for high school. You run the same program there to see what changed, and found that there is no difference in the innate abilities of children in any of these schools. Children are exactly the same. But what we feed them, what we teach them, completely changes them over time, and they start to peel off. Some of them who got all the extra training, they go on, aspire to do something higher. Others do not. What we were trying to measure were, how do they learn? Their learning agility, their self-learning skills, curiosity, ability to understand STEM, apply the theory of what they're learning. Then their social engagement. How do they work with each other? How do you collaborate, communicate in groups? Innovation skills in critical thinking, creativity, design. This is where all the technical stuff comes in, fabrication and such. And entrepreneurship attitudes of self-efficacy, which is a confidence to take on unknown challenges. the agency, resilience. How do you look at problems as opportunities and such? So when you look at all these things, you realize there is no difference in the abilities of these kids till about mid-teens, and then slowly things start to change. We need to intervene very early on to create those problem solvers of tomorrow and the entrepreneurs of tomorrow. So I talked about 1 million entrepreneurs. How do I even get to million? I possibly cannot teach 1 million people. So what we want to create are ecosystems that take in new candidates, train them, and they become the change makers for the next generation of people coming in. So an ecosystem primarily consists of three things. One is a center, a space where there is materials, books, and tools, and all kinds of things that just stuff that money can buy. Second is a community of mentors and students and teachers and professors, and who come together and help each other to learn. And third is a culture of learning and culture of innovation, where you try something, you get your help from others and you fail, and others will say that is perfectly fine, go back and try it again. The culture of inspiration and encouragement. If you build these things over time, you can start to create a self-standing, sustainable ecosystem that starts to churn out. Once you get the engine running, you can actually do that. So as experiments I did, I went into multiple colleges in India as part of my research. I took 50 kids and taught them every day for 2 hours after college. And this is a picture from 2013, 2014, when I was teaching them. Out of the 23 kids out of the 50, 11 of them did their first startup. And out of the 50, 24 of them did their first startup. So the thing is, this is in a college that had one student startup in the previous 12 years. In one first year itself, they had about 12 startups that came out. Now they have the ecosystem that they created within the school. Interestingly, most of them, they started the first startup. Most startups failed. Some of them went back to the second one, some of them third, and I think there are some of them who did up to 4 startups since then. But the thing is, what really changed was they changed their aspiration. They found a direction. This is what the principal wrote to me. They improved in academics, and this is in a small college in India where none of them went out to foreign universities. Now students started going out to other universities for higher education. And of course, there were some startups that came out. In Malaysia, we started with 60 children. And over a matter of 9 months, there were 150 kids who were designing and making all kinds of things in their schools. In India, it was harder because we had to go give them computers. We gave 6 computers to each of these schools, and we had to put young adults to come and teach them how to use these things. And over a matter of 6 months, these kids were making all kinds of IoT devices and robots and such. So basically, this can be taught. This can be trained. This is the Minister of Education from East Timor, Timor-Leste, which is the small little country on the eastern end of Indonesia. And this is a lab I set up with UNDP, where we brought young adults, taught them these things, took them out into farms and fields to find problems and solve. And now they change their teaching school kids to make a difference in the next generation. So during COVID, I was running these kind of programs online. So this can actually be taught online too. So we created kits of materials, sent it out to college students. These are from Indian Institute of Technology, which is like the MIT of India, and students sitting across the country in their homes and were teaching these things. These are a school in South Africa. This is me sitting in New Hampshire doing the same work. And a few months back, I actually went there and ran the program again in townships outside Cape Town. Now I'm working in poorer communities across US, Fitchburg, Richmond, Puerto Rico. Now we created a program for girls in villages in Vietnam to train them in these kind of things. So ran about 100 or so workshops around the world and set up these little ecosystems from the bottom up. So this is what I learned. First thing is we are leaving behind so many or large majority of kids with so much potential. All kids have the potential, but we never nurture them, we never develop it. And then when they become adults, we wonder how to change them. We actually spend more time trying to change them later than nurturing them very early on. Creating ecosystem is the way to catalyze these kind of changes from the bottom up. Early intervention is absolutely critical. If you can change the beginning of a story of a child, you can change the entire story. How do we reach them when they're young and start to build this confidence and abilities and self-learning skills? And you have completely transformed the child. So today's need is we need to create these experiential courses in schools and colleges. So I created 2 courses called Zero to Maker and Zero to Entrepreneur, primarily taking them through white belt to black belt in creativity, problem solving, opportunity sensing, and they create their own portfolio of projects which could be used for college admissions or job interviews and such. Imagine coming to a job interview with a portfolio of all kinds of technical products and projects that you have done, creating a digital platform to bring them together. So this is actually a course has been approved in New Hampshire, and we are trying to bring this program into India, into schools in India. So where we want to train the youth in colleges and communities and make them the change makers to make the change in schools. So we could actually train young adults who can get better jobs with these kind of experience, while they're also transforming the next generation of children. So that is what I do. And I would like to take any questions anyone may have. And if anyone wants to write to me, here's my email address. So with that, I can take any question.